The book I chose to read is This Changes Everything: Capitalism versus the Climate by Naomi Klein. Hello, Garfield. So, Naomi Klein is a journalist. She wrote books like Shock Doctrine and No Logo. And these books are really anti corporate and really anti capitalist. And they're really anti corporate and really anti capitalist. And okay. Naomi Klein is a journalist, and she's also a writer. She wrote books like Shock Doctrine and No Logo. And she's very anti corporate. She doesn't like big business. And that kind of shows through in this book as well, where she talks about how she talks about climate change and how we can stop it, but she also talks about how we can, quote, transform our failed economic system into something better. Now, the book is divided into three parts. We got part one, bad timing, part two, magical thinking, and part three, starting anyway. And I'll go through each of those parts for you now, Garfield. So, her main part one, bad timing, talks about the background of climate change and the problems that are facing us right now. And for example, she says that the market is the one that's currently stopping the progress on climate change. She says that the real voices that are denouncing climate change aren't skeptic scientists. They're like people who have an interest in stopping the regulation of the economy, like the right wing think tank, the Heartland Institute. And that think tank held a climate change conference that essentially just served for them to say, oh, climate change, it's just a big hoax to spread communism because we're still living in the 1950s under the reign of Joe McCarthy. And that's basically what happened at the conference, according to Naomi Klein. And here's a quote from her that says why these think tanks don't like the idea of taking action against climate change, or the idea that climate change exists. She says, if the free market system really has set in motion physical and chemical processes that, if allowed to continue unchecked, threaten large parts of humanity at an existential level, then their entire crusade to morally redeem capitalism has been for naught. So, what she's really saying right there is that the think tanks believe that climate change can't be real because it threatens capitalism. It says that we have to regulate our economy, which means that the free market doesn't work. And that's the right wing think tanks were created to spread that belief. So, of course, they're going to believe that climate change isn't real. They're going to oppose any legislation that regulates the free market, the very thing they were created to defend. Alrighty, and then part two, magical thinking. This part is about how the people in charge are doing things the wrong way. They're going about things the wrong way. They're teaming up with the wrong people. For example, she talks about how the environmental companies or environmental organizations are teaming up with fossil fuel companies and essentially just being bought out by them. And they're just being used to spread the pro fossil fuel, pro big business message, which is just going to keep spreading climate change more. Or another example she gives is the Virgin Airlines pilot who made a bunch of big goals on how he's going to usher in a new era of clean energy and put forward $3 billion to help fund clean energy. And then he kind of just silently pulled away all of that money and undid all of his promises because, looks like doing clean energy, it's not good for the quarterly profits. Or another example that she discusses is geoengineering, which is ways of altering the Earth's climate to prevent climate change on a massive scale. For example, one of the things, the main one, is how scientists try to emulate volcanoes by putting sulfur dioxide, which is what came from a big eruption in the 1990s, into the air, which will temporarily cool the Earth's atmosphere, or cool the Earth. But even though this helps countries like Europe and North America stay cool and avoid climate change, this also causes droughts in Africa and hurricanes in most parts of Southeast Asia. So, who cares? The white people are fine, so we're good. Part 3 starting anyways. She argues that grassroots movements have been doing most of the work to prevent climate change, and that they still should be doing most of the work to prevent climate change. She gives examples of how citizens are pushing back on big projects like the Keystone XL pipeline going through the Dakotas, and she says how Germany made really big strides in their environmental programs, not by mandating national clean energy programs, but by giving communities and co-ops decentralized power and giving them the ability to choose their own renewables and make the profits themselves. Okay, so that was part 1 of 3. Naomi Klein's purpose when writing this book is to inspire people, like average citizens, to take action to stop climate change without waiting around for other people to do it, like leaders or billionaires like Virgin Airlines, and in the process bring about a better world for all people. And she accomplishes this by using a lot of rhetorical strategies in her book, which emphasize her point. For example, we got one quote here. She says, "Of course Britain, the nation that invented the coal-fired steam engine, has been emitting industrial levels of carbon for longer than any nation on Earth, and therefore bears a particularly great responsibility to increase as opposed to claw back foreign aid. But never mind that. Screw the poor. Suck it up. Everyone for themselves." That's the end of the quote. So now here, she uses her short sentences to mock her opponents. She not only condenses their arguments into small short phrases at the end of her long lengthy sentences for good contrast, but she also, with her short sentences, shows that her opponents are a little slow and can't form much more than monosyllabic answers, which kind of strengthens her own point by putting herself in contrast with those who she's arguing against. And then we got a second quote here, which further demonstrates her use of rhetorical strategies. She says, "I'm not asking anyone to take my word on the science. I think that all of us should take the word of 97% of climate scientists in their countless peer-reviewed articles, as well as every National Academy of Science in the world, not to mention establishment institutions like the World Bank and the International Energy Agency, all of which are telling us we are headed towards catastrophic levels of warming." Now here she appeals to ethos by invoking the authority of all of these scientists and academics and institutions. So it's really clear that she achieves her author's purpose really well in this story with all of her rhetorical strategies and persuasive writing. Okay, bye-bye, Garfield. Call you again for part 3. Oh, hi, Garfield. So, for my critique, I really enjoyed the book. She makes a lot of really well-supportive arguments. After all, she does have over 50 pages of citations in the back of her book. But sometimes her writing does seem a little amateur, kind of like an op-ed that you'd see in the Huffington Post. Um, but I don't think that's because of her writing. Her writing is very high quality. It's probably just more of the subject matter or her radical standpoint. This isn't very exactly a popular opinion after all. She also does definitely take a very populist stance towards it. She argues that we need more citizens working to campaign and that the time has really passed for our leaders to make change for us. And, you know, I think that's a pretty convincing argument. I don't disagree with that. I'm sure many people would, but I think it's a very good book overall. It's very high quality of writing. So, yeah, you know, see you around. Bye bye, Garfield.